Hi, welcome to Interviews. Today I am in Cambodia with Nancy and Chris, the founders of Tango Asia, an advertising and marketing agency. Hey guys, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Laurent.
So please just tell me a little bit more about your business.
So Mango Tango is as you said, full-service advertising and marketing agency. We're here in Cambodia, and we serve a lot of clients in Southeast Asia, and actually we serve some clients around the world as well. So we started almost 5 years ago, and now we are up to about 50 people. And we do everything from, we like to start with strategy and research and help people understand what their challenges are and the strategic approach to solving them. And then once we figure that out, we can do the execution, everything from television commercials and radio spots to digital media, application development, software, and everything in between that you need to communicate.
Sure. And what is your role in the company, Nancy?
Well, my role is head of strategy.
Okay.
My background is big advertising agency, big clients, Microsoft, IBM, and really thinking strategically about their channel strategy, their messaging strategy, their segmentation strategy. And honestly, when we first got here, we started doing a lot of speaking about data-driven marketing and very sophisticated approaches to marketing. But we have found that in Cambodia, they're looking for something a little different.
Okay.
And now we generally service international companies who are coming to Cambodia, and they need everything from us, from their TV commercial, their brand positioning, to their uniforms of the staff. Sometimes we do product design. So as Chris said, we really are truly full service.
Okay. What about you, Chris? Your background?
So I'm the CEO here, and so I help with everything from finance to making sure the trash is taken out, strategy and investment. I mean, sort of in charge of everything. And my background also is in advertising and technology. I started in New York and got to work for some ad tech companies, advertising technology companies in Silicon Valley and in Singapore. And we're here and we're growing. It's been a fun, successful ride so far.
Nice.
And then I wanted to put a little bit of a finer point on what Nancy was saying about how, because we did come to this market and we brought some of the latest tools and technologies and approaches for doing advertising and marketing, including data driven and digital tools. I think when we got here 5 years ago, that was a little bit too soon for that. And to be fair, a little bit too soon for that for a lot of companies in the world.
Okay.
But now things have started to shift very quickly. So we start to see more companies, both local and international companies in Cambodia, embracing a lot of the new approaches and tools.
That's interesting. So when you arrived, you have like some expectations coming from your background from New York and other countries, Singapore, etc. So what did you learn from that experience where you realized that your expectations were not to be met?
Well, we were able to get a lot of attention quickly, which was great. So we felt like we were getting traction in the market. But what we realized was we were having conversations, but the clients just didn't understand or weren't ready to consider the kind of more sophisticated marketing services we thought would be a unique offering. So we really had to expand our approach and get to basics.
Back to basics. But I think so there's a couple of interesting aspects to that and Cambodia. So Cambodia, as you know, since you've been here, has been growing at an average rate of 7.5% for 21 years. So it's finally reached the point where that matters, I think, significantly. A lot of the companies that were here before and when we arrived 5 years ago, there was not very much competition. Often there was just one or two companies in each category, and they weren't used to spending money on marketing or thinking about it in a sophisticated way. Now we get a lot of calls from companies that are here, and they say, we're losing market share tremendously. What should we do? And we say, well, do you do any marketing? Oh, we've never had to do marketing before. So I think, partly along with the growth and Cambodia's emergence into a middle income country where you see a large middle class, how there's a lot more companies, a lot more competition. So the conversation, even in 5 years, has shifted tremendously. Also, the traffic.
Yes. Uh, when you said, you had to get back to basics, you guys had a lot of experience before coming to Cambodia. Wasn't it too difficult for you to get back to basics like that?
I think what we realized is what we brought that was unique, that was valued, was that international perception. And most of our clients, again, are international companies doing business here. So we've really positioned ourselves as the international perspective with the understanding of the local market.
Okay.
One of the first things we did here was a major study of the changing Cambodian consumer, really across many, many categories. And honestly, that helped ground us in the Cambodian consumer. But I do think that what we have offered that has helped us grow is, international standards for the quality of the work that we do, but through the eyes of what's going to work.
Yeah, know your market.
Yes, exactly.
How long have you guys been entrepreneurs for?
Well, for me, it's been on and off. I've been mainly big agency world, but we did spend several years in San Francisco, and I did, of course, join a startup. So I had that. But Chris has been more of an entrepreneur over the years.
I was also part of the big agency world in New York City. I started at Ogilvy and built the very first ad agency website in 1993 when it was still not allowed because the internet was still for educational and military purposes only. So from there, I went out to Silicon Valley. I had an opportunity to work at an early advertising technology company. So my background in startups has been, and ever since then, I've been in the startup world, some small, some larger. And so that's sort of my entrepreneurship background. And I will say, more about, I was very lucky. I got to join a firm because I was the subject matter expert on internet advertising. I got to join a firm in Silicon Valley in Saratoga, which is right next to Cupertino, Palo Alto area. So truly Silicon Valley. The folks that were running the company were serial entrepreneurs.
Right.
They had been some of the early founders of Sun, employees at Sun Microsystems, and they had gone on to start, I think the company I joined, which was called IQ Commerce, I think it was their fifth or sixth startup, and they had sold several. But what I got to see there in the late 90s in Silicon Valley was how you really set up and grow a company, how you scale it. There were not the level of books and videos and information about how to start a company and scale a company that we have today. I mean, now you can just, go watch courses on lynda.com or online and find a lot of information. But at the time, there wasn't too much. So it was great. I got to be mentored by a couple of guys who knew how to scale a company, how important the product was, how important the customer focus was, how important it was to find a beta customer and grow them and not grow too quickly. So it's a lot. There's a lot of nuance to it.
So they gave you the taste of entrepreneurship, right?
That's where I first sort of got that grounding in what it means and how fun it can be, how much work it can be, how frustrating it can be, but also exciting.
Right. Yeah. So tell me a bit more about your entrepreneurship journey so far. How has it been going? The good, the bads.
The bad?
Whatever you want to start with.
Entrepreneurship journey. Well, every company is different. Every environment is different. The context is often different. Cambodia, obviously a different context. I think one of the benefits of being in Cambodia is that for us anyway, and for any startup company, having a wide open market is a great place to start. You don't want to launch a breakfast cereal company because it's a very crowded space. But in Cambodia, there were really no companies operating with, I think, that sort of more professional approach to marketing when we got here. So that was partly attractive.
What about you, Nancy? Because you got less experience as an entrepreneur.
No, most of my career, I have to admit, was in very large organizations on very large pieces of business. So it's definitely been challenging. You kind of miss the regular paycheck and the perks of being part of a large company, the ability to take vacation, for example. But I think we're bringing a level of professionalism to it that gives us confidence that we can move forward.
Right. So you are enjoying it.
Yeah. So ultimately, what's nice is, being part of a large organization, you're a cog in the wheel. You're very replaceable. So there's some comfort in that you're not that important, but there's also your role is ultimately very limited. Whereas here is our company. We decide who we want to hire. We decide whether or not we want to pitch a certain client. If we think a client's going to be very difficult, we might just choose to pass.
Yeah.
So we do have a lot more control over the work, and that's really great.
I have to agree with that. The liberty of selecting your clients, it's absolutely fantastic.
Right, because there are some clients you just don't really want to work with.
It's all about the context. There's a client for everyone.
Yeah, of course, exactly. But you want to choose the right client for yourself that you can service the best because this is the right profile. And what are you guys good at?
Making payroll,
Making payroll?
managing cash flow.
Yeah.
Well, different things, right? I think we've managed to build a nice culture and build a process that works for the company. So we are continuing to grow and expand. But I was only half kidding about that. I mean, a lot of what we're responsible for is just making sure that the lights come on and the day-to-day continues. So I think part of what I've become good at, although it's not necessarily my favorite thing, is financial management.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I started out as a copywriter at Ogilvy in New York. And then I was the digital guy because I knew how to use it.
And now you're into financials. Yeah, I want to talk more about that because a lot of my clients they're all entrepreneurs, and a lot of them they struggle with financials because they don't realize that first they need to have financial management, and then they don't see how they can use financials to make decisions, to make informed decisions. So I want to talk a bit more about that. How do you do, proper financial management?
Now
it's tedious. Yeah, I think one of the things we've been very happy with and feel very lucky about is the quality of the staff we've recruited. And I think our first full-time local employee was our
a financial manager,
right?
Yeah,
and she's fantastic.
Okay.
And she's been a tremendous resource. And not everybody understands that's the first thing you have to invest in, because if you don't know where the money's going, you're lost.
I agree. That, and I would say a cash flow forecast fine. Because often what I see with my clients again is they don't manage cash flow, so they often face cash flow shortfalls, and they don't see that at the end of the month they need to pay the salaries of the staff, but they don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
Well, and we all any company, even large companies, face cash flow shortfalls or challenges. I think the difference that you're describing is we're not surprised by that.
Right. Yes.
I can see that coming 2 or 3 months ahead, and think, okay, we have to manage. Like let's say we shoot a TV commercial. A lot of times we have to put out a lot of the money by ourselves, and that can be $100,000 or $200,000.
Yeah.
And then that's going to really interfere with cash flow. So you can sort of see ahead and manage it. I think everyone manages it, but in the case of, as you're describing some of the people that you work with, it comes as a surprise. Like on Tuesday, they realize that they're going to run out of money on Friday.
Yeah.
So it's more about setting a little bit of a runway. That's actually something else I think that was drilled into us. What I learned in Silicon Valley when I got to work at that early stage startup, the entire leadership team from every department, HR, infrastructure, we all got in a room once a week and reviewed what was happening before, what happened this week, make plans for the future, what are we working on. Then we would always look at the cash flow.
Right.
The CFO would hand out little pieces of paper saying, "Here's what the runway looks like."
So there was complete transparency.
There was absolutely and I saw that early on. I was quite surprised by that in Silicon Valley. But there is a lot of not down to the level of every staff member, but the leadership team, the wider leadership team, had access to what was happening with the cash in the company. And I think that was effective because it made it real for everyone to see like, so we could look at the runway. They often talked about the runway, and how I heard one of our board members describe it. They said, well, the runway is the cash flow for your company, and your company is an airplane.
Right.
And it's going down the runway. And at some point, it's going to take off, and you're going to have a viable business. But if you run out of runway, even if it's a few meters before the end, that's the end.
Right. Yeah.
Even if you're about to take off. So pay attention to that runway.
Yeah. That's why I tell my clients that cash is the number one priority. This is the first thing that they should always look at least as managers.
I think that's right. I hear a lot of people say, oh, but isn't it strategy or staff? And I think, yes, but those things don't matter if you've run out of it.
Exactly. Plus, if you're growing and you're expecting to grow, you're going to need cash to expand your business. Okay. So, what other financial tools do you use? So we talk about cash flow. Do you guys do a budget file every year?
We do budgeting. It's not as useful when you're in a high growth phase. I mean, it's useful, and I recommend doing it. But it can change very quickly, especially as you're growing. Okay. So for a smaller company, it's more. I had one experienced CFO tell me, like, budgeting is one thing, but it's really cash in and cash out, right? It's how much you're getting in and how much are you spending, at least until you have a viable ongoing business. Yeah. So budgeting,
But we do budget client by client and project by project, because it's very hard. Clients are always trying to beat you down. Procurement tries to beat us down on price. Yes. And then, of course, the clients always want extras. Yeah. So we do try to pay close attention to, how much are we getting for this project? How much are we getting for this project? And then, are we putting in a lot of extra hours? Is this client demanding more? And then how do we manage that?
Fine. And so how has proper financial management, how has it positively impacted your business?
Well, I think it's allowed us to grow quickly, because you can see where you have a surplus or not, and sometimes you need to add extra capacity in order to make more money, but you need to see where that's possible, right? So I think that's what's allowed us to be sort of effectively growing more quickly, I think, than we would have otherwise. Okay,
great. Coming back to your entrepreneur's life, how do you manage your private life with your professional life? Can you find the right balance?
Well, I'm not sure if your viewers know, although it did come up possibly earlier when we said we were in San Francisco together. But we are married.
Yes, I know. I should have specified that.
So this is actually our first company that we've ever run together. Right. We've been married for 20 years, and we met at work. We met at Ogilvy in New York in conference room 6B.
You still remember the
but we didn't work on the same accounts, and I think I left shortly thereafter, and then we've never worked together before. So this was sort of a first endeavor.
Was that a difficult decision to make, like to work together?
I thought it was. I was a little hesitant.
As a man, I paid no attention.
Of course not.
Yeah. I was concerned, but and it is very challenging, especially when you're facing the early stresses of growing. When it's going well, it's great, but it is very hard to have a work-life balance, because we can't help but have conversations about work at home, and sometimes it's really would be nice to just leave things at the office.
But sometimes you have an idea and you just want to, you're like, I don't want to forget about this, so let me tell you about this.
Yeah, but you could write it in a notebook instead.
So busy, how we watched 7 seasons of Game of Thrones in a month. Sometimes I have to turn it off and say, I thought about something from work. I don't recommend it, but we got to the end.
Yeah, but one thing we do appreciate here and try very much, at least for our team, to have is a work-life balance. Coming from a very stressful world of the big agencies in New York, people would be expected to work a lot of overtime. And we really have never been forced to require that. And of course, as you know, Cambodia has so many holidays, which we do our best to manage around, but that is challenging. But it's really we try to make sure everybody else has a good work-life balance and that doesn't feel stressed, and that we don't, again, that's part of budgeting for projects. If you take on projects and you're not getting paid enough, then people just have to work overtime. So we do try to not do that. But for ourselves, because we, ultimately we're responsible for everything, it does end up being a lot of extra time, as I'm sure any entrepreneur will tell you.
Sure, yeah. But I totally agree with you. Sometimes you have an idea, you're like, oh, I really need to write it down or talk to someone about it because it's on the moment. I coached clients of mine, and they were business partners, but also partners in life, and they reached a point where they had that difficulties to balance their private life with their work life. So one of the exercises that we did together was to set up rules. So, like for example, one of the rules would be like, on Sunday they do not talk about work.
So what if you have an idea?
That was exactly the point of having the rule. So maybe you can implement that.
we managed to shut off. I mean, sometimes we'll go away on a long weekend and just and not talk about work. So.
And still on your entrepreneurship journey, considering everything that you know today, would you have done some things differently?
That is a good question, and I did get the questions in advance, but that one I'm not sure what the answer to that is. I mean, partly I think it's because we've both done startups before and spent a lot of time thinking about what works and what doesn't work. So,
but I think as we started talking in the beginning, we did initially come in thinking, oh, we have access to sophisticated ways of doing marketing that'll be embraced by the market. I think if we know then, we wouldn't have focused so much on that approach. We would have gone right to a kind of different positioning, which is what we have now, which is, we are your feet on the street here in Cambodia. We have unique local knowledge, but with it, that international level of professionalism and sophistication that you're looking for. Right. So I think we could have maybe maneuvered our positioning differently earlier on.
That's true. I mean, I think what we would have done differently is we would have understood a little bit more about the market and what it was possible to sell or not sell here. But I don't think anyone's going to know that starting out a business. I mean, a lot of it is, people talk today about pivoting, which pivoting typically meant getting into an entirely different line of business. But now I think it's a little more nuanced, and it means understanding like who's the clients we're selling to and how do we talk about it and what mix of products or services do we have. So I think knowing that in advance would have been great, but you're never going to know that in any company. You're always going to learn as you go along.
So what would be your last advice for audience entrepreneurs or, and soon to be entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs? What would you tell them to do?
I would say actually work in a company.
First.
Yeah, there's a lot of research out there that shows that the most successful entrepreneurs, by a factor of like 100, are people who have worked for 10 or more years in the industry in which they start a company, a startup, whether it's a competing company or whether it's a startup where they're solving a problem. The research shows, and there's quite a lot of research, that being an expert, being in an industry and learning about it, number one, you get the contacts as you get older, so that now you have people And number two, you really understand the nuances of the industry so that you can build a competing company or a product that's needed. But today there's a little bit of a zeitgeist where anyone can be an entrepreneur, and there's a lot of focus on school programs where you're going to come out of school and be an entrepreneur, and that's nice that the energy is there and that people are being taught some skills about how to think about it. But if you look at the data, typically it's people who have been in an industry who start either a disruptive company or a competitive company in that industry. The most successful ones, by a huge factor, have had a lot of experience in that space.
All right. Interesting. What about you? What would you say?
I think another aspect to consider is who your partner with.
Yeah, obviously.
We know personally quite a few companies where maybe 3 people started and then the partnership just fell apart.
Yeah.
So that's another serious challenge, I think, that people don't see going into it. They're just like, yeah, let's do this. But down the road, it may be a problem.
All right. Well, yes.
Actually, just to elaborate on that,
Yeah.
I had one of the accountants we had a long time ago at another startup had given that same advice, that you really should go and look at, there's checklists you can get, you can go online and here's a list of shareholder issues, because you have to think about what you want out of the business. Is it a lifestyle business, by which I mean you might just continue it forever? Do you intend to sell? What if you get a big sale offer and the other person doesn't want to sell? So going through the exercise with your partner of thinking about future things that you might not think about, it's really important to get those differences out at the beginning. So this accountant said, and I think he'd had a firm with a partner for 20-something years. That was Bob, what's his name? He and his partner, they sat down, they made a shareholder agreement, they worked out some issues. He said, if it works out, we put it in a drawer, we never looked at it again. We were okay.
Yeah.
But that is not always the case. People sometimes have different expectations going in, and it doesn't come out until later. So that's, I think, also.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time today. Thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll see you later. Bye.